in biblical thought, there's 3 types of information, and each type of information is really the realm of a different type of person or a different category of person. And specifically, we see Tanakh in Hebrew. We call the Old Testament, we don't call it Old Testament in Hebrew. In ancient Hebrew, you call it Mikra, which is literally the reading, that which is read aloud in the synagogue. And then another name for it is Tanakh. Tanakh is an acronym for Torah, the instruction, usually translated law, Nevi'im, the prophets, and Ketuvim, the writings. Yes. Now, if you're used to your English Bible, the King James Version or something like that, the NRSV or the NIV or the NASB, you may open up a Hebrew Bible or even an English translation that follows the Hebrew style, like the JPS, and you'll say, where's Daniel? Why isn't Daniel among the prophets? Why is he in the writings? And you'll be looking for the category called historical books. We don't have that category in the Hebrew tradition of the Tanakh. We have, like I said, the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses. And then we have the prophets, the Nevi'im, which are really 8 books, or they're defined as 8 books, even though in English they're far more than that. So what do we have in the prophets? We have first our 4 historical type books, but they're part of the prophets, and they have a chronology from Joshua, from the entering of the land all the way into the exile. Yes. So it's Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. And you may say, wait a minute, Samuel's 2 books, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. Well, not in the Hebrew. They were divided into Greek into 1 Kings. Actually, in Greek, they were divided into 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 3 Kings, and 4 Kings, right? Meaning Samuel was called 1 and 2 Kings. What we call in Hebrew Melachim. Kings was called in the Greek 3rd and 4th Kings. So we have those 4 books, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, and those are called the former prophets. And then we have what are called the latter prophets. Not that they were later, but they come later in the series of books as we arrange them on the shelf. So the latter prophets are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and then the 12 minor prophets. So there's 4 and 4. 12 minor prophets are considered a single book, even though obviously they're 12 small books. But because they were so small, there was a concern the scroll would get lost if it was a separate scroll. So originally it was, or at some point in Second Temple times, it became a single scroll. So that's the prophets. Daniel isn't in there, right? But we have these historical books, right? So Kings is in there, but Daniel is not. And then we have the Ketuvim, the writing, Tanakh. Ketuvim is the writings or the holy writings. Some people translate that the Hagiographa, which means the holy writings. The holy writings begin with Psalms, although in some manuscripts it begins with Chronicles, actually. So you have what are called the books of truth, Sifrei Emet, and that's an acronym. The acronym is for Job, Proverbs, and Psalms, although not in that order. That spells Emet, Iyov, Mishlei, Tehillim, Sifrei Emet. And they are special books because they actually have their own accent system, right? Every word or every phrase, I should say, in the Tanakh has an accent associated with it. Every unit of speech has an accent, as Hebrew defines it, associated with it. But then the 3 truth books, Emet, they have their own accent system. And then you have the 5 scrolls. The 5 scrolls and they have different orders, even in different Hebrew Bibles. So they're Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Esther, Lamentations, and Ruth. And then you have, at the end, you have Ezra and Nehemiah, which is 1 book. You have Daniel, which is obviously 1 book. And then you have Chronicles, which is 1 book. And altogether, that's 24 books. That's the Tanakh. Now, why do I bring that up? Because that division into 3 is something that's already mentioned in the Tanakh. It's also mentioned in the New Testament that we'll get to. But just to bring a verse in the Tanakh that reflects this, Jeremiah 18:18. And can I ask you to read that, Keith?
Absolutely.
Jeremiah 18:18.
So I'm reading from the NASB, Jeremiah 18:18. Then they said, "Come and let us devise plans against Jeremiah. Surely the law is not going to be
Torah.
lost. Yeah, the Torah is not going to be lost to the priest, nor counsel, to the sage, nor the divine word to the prophet. Come on and let us strike at him with our tongue, and let us give no heed to any of his words.
So what happened is Jeremiah warned the people. He said, this religious system, this religion that you've created is going to be destroyed. The Babylonians are going to conquer the land, send you in exile, and the false Torah that you get from the priest, and the false wisdom that you get from the sage, and the false prophecy you get from the prophet, those will be destroyed, they'll be lost. And he comes along and says, or these false people come along and say, no, these things won't. So let's just kill Jeremiah, and that will invalidate his prophecy, and we'll be able to continue in our false religion. But what we see is in the mind of the ancient Israelite, there's three realms of information. There's Torah taught by a Kohen, a priest. There's wisdom or counsel in this case, advice, really, it could be translated as well, taught by a sage, a wise person, a chacham. And there is word, literally word from the prophet. And why is this important? Because in Matthew chapters 1 through 4, we talked about how Yeshua was being presented as a prophet. In Matthew 5 through 7, he's being presented as a wise man, as a sage. Right? We have those three realms of information. Torah, prophets, writings, and writings really is the wisdom. What do we have in the writings? We have Proverbs, we have Ecclesiastes, we have Daniel. Look at Daniel in the first chapter. It talks about how he was a wise man, how he was trained in wisdom. That's what he's doing in the writings. So we have this division into three in the Tanakh, in ancient Israel, rather, and the Tanakh itself is divided along that. And then now we see in Matthew 1 through 4, and I think especially in like 4 we saw, he's being presented as a prophet, and now he's being presented as the wise man, as the chacham, according to that same division. Ezekiel 7:26 is another one. It says, and they will seek vision from the prophet.
Yes.
And Torah will be lost from the Kohen, from the priest, the instruction from the priest, and advice or counsel from the elders. So elder is another term for sage, because often those who are old have wisdom. Sometimes young people have wisdom. So you see this division into three. And whenever you see a phrase like Ashrei is a wisdom saying.
Yes.
Right? So right from the bat, people standing and hearing Yeshua preach would hear Ashrei, Ashrei, Ashrei. And they knew, okay, this is a sage who's speaking to us wisdom. Is a typical wisdom saying. There's a very cool thing I can do on my computer in my TapTap program in Accordance.
What's
so
that?
I go to the Tanakh, and I type in the word Ashrei. Let's do it. And I do a search, and I get Ashrei, blessed is, and it appears in the Tanakh. It appears 44 times in 41 verses. And then I can do a thing where it does analysis. And it tells me, I do a thing where it says, let's see, hits graph. And it shows me how many hits, just like, you do hits in like back in the old days when they had search engines, that would tell you how many hits you got. So how many hits are here? So if you look at the graph, you'll see there's almost all of the, or a very large percentage of the Ashrei statements are in Psalms and Proverbs. Now, what does Psalms have to do with wisdom? So wisdom encompasses things like songs and praise. That's in that realm of wisdom. And then you have a reference to that division of three in Luke 24:44. So this is when they're walking on the road to Emmaus. Then he said to them, these are my words that I spoke with you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the Torah of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms must be fulfilled. Does he just mean the book of Psalms? I don't think so. I think he means Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. And the first book in the Ketuvim is the Psalms, right? It's the beginning of the wisdom section, which is the Psalms. Ben Sira, who was written around 200 BC and then translated about 25 years later by his grandson, and he mentions many great teachings have been given to us through the law and the prophets and the others that followed them. They don't mean people that followed the prophets here. What he means is the books that follow in the order, Torah, prophets, and writings, right? When you have them arranged on a shelf, it's Torah, prophets, and writings, right? They weren't bound necessarily into a single scroll. They may have been, I suppose, but they definitely were arranged in that order. And he says, his grandfather's name was Yeshua, incidentally. This is Ben Sira, 175 BC, who had devoted himself especially to the reading of the law and the prophets and the other books of our ancestors. That's the writings or the wisdom books. So here we are now in Matthew, we've reached the wisdom sayings. And that's really how I think we have to look at all of Matthew chapter 5 through 7. It's a series of teaching of wisdom sayings.